Today is going to be a very fun day. It's either going to answer the question of what is the coolest server I've ever bought and got running in my server rack, or answer the question, why is it I drink so much? Are you struggling to play the latest games because your PC just isn't up to the task? Is your new handheld not quite as powerful as you were hoping for? With Maximum Settings Cloud Gaming, you can get access to a powerful gaming PC in the cloud with the ability to stream a wide range of games and programs to nearly any device. Powered by a foundation of open source software like Linux Mint, Proxmox, Sunshine, and Moonlight, you'll have access to a Linux desktop, all pre-configured with Steam, Heroic Games, Lutris, and more. Virtualized gaming machines start at just $9.95 a month Canadian, or around $7.40 US, and you'll be up and gaming just a few minutes after creating your account. Or for uncompromised performance, opt for bare metal access with an AMD 7800X 3D CPU and a Radeon RX 7900 XT graphics card. I've demoed self-hosted cloud gaming on this channel before, but not everyone's crazy enough to have a server rack out in their garage. Get the flexibility of a cloud gaming system without the hassle of building and maintaining it yourself. Visit MaximumSettings.com or click the link down in the video description to get started today. And thanks to Maximum Settings Cloud Gaming for sponsoring today's video. Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff, and it is part 2 of my server rack rebuild 2024. And it's also going to be the video that determines if there's a part 3. If you watched part 1 of this already very short series, you know that last week I replaced the motherboard and CPU in my Craftinator from 45 Drives. That is their AV15 and my primary storage server. So in went the Intel Xeon 5218 Gold CPU, 16 cores with 32 threads, and 1 terabyte of Intel Optane persistent memory modules, and out came the system that I needed today to work on today's server, and that is my Epyc 7601 32-core processor. Now during that video, I mentioned that this 7601 had developed an issue where one of the memory channels had just completely dropped out. But if you work in IT, specifically as a field technician, you know that sometimes all you need to repair something is a trip to another location. So I brought this in fully expecting to, in this video, diagnose why one of the memory channels was dead, fired up the server, and all 8 memory channels are working again. So I tore the CPU down again, reseated it, reapplied the cooler, reapplied thermal paste, and I couldn't get the 8th channel to fail again. So both my CPU and my motherboard are in good working order. So troubleshooting this system was actually going to be part 2 of this video series, but now we get to skip directly to part 3, which is why I needed the Epyc 7601 back. And to answer that, I'm gonna need a little bit more room on the table. Oh God, this thing's heavy. Ugh. I don't know if I want to make a Star Wars joke of she doesn't look like much kid, but she's got it where it counts, or go full Spaceballs, because this thing goes on for miles. This is a 1U server that is 37 inches long from knot to tip. So what exactly are we looking at? Well, this is my most recent eBay purchase because I was up late one night and got really curious on what exactly the system was, why I was seeing so many of them for sale on eBay, and if it could work in someone's home lab. This is the Quanta T22HF 1U 2-node server. That's right, inside of this very long box are 2 very long server blades that look a little something like this. Each of these blades houses a motherboard with a single AMD SP3 socket and 16 DDR4 memory DIMMs. That means this, in theory, should support both AMD Naples and Epyc Rome for the CPU platform, giving us up to 64 cores and 128 threads, along with 8 channels of DDR4 registered ECC memory support. But the specs get even crazier from there. One of the main calling cards of AMD Epyc is its PCI Express connectivity, and despite these being literal half-height blades, this has PCI Express connectivity in spades. Up front, we have 2 PCI Express X16 slots, one of them in a full height, the other in a low profile slot. We also have 6 U.2 NVMe sleds along the back of the chassis. As far as I/O, you'd be correct in assuming there's not a lot here, as this is supposed to be a Blade compute module, not necessarily a device that you connect a lot of other devices to. We've got a VGA port, 2 USB 3.0 ports, a gigabit Ethernet that is dedicated to BMC control, more on that later, as well as a 10 gigabit SFP Plus port supplied by a Quanta mezzanine card right here in the rear. That means if you're wanting to use this for 10 gigabit networking primarily, you don't have to sacrifice one of your PCI Express X16 slots just to get yourself some more network speed. The crazy thing about this chassis and the two blades was actually how inexpensive it was compared to a lot of other AMD Epyc equipment that's currently on the used marketplace. When I bought the H11 SSL motherboard that my Epyc 7601 is in, I think I only paid about $230 for that board. That was almost 4 years ago now. That same motherboard is going for between $300 and $400 used on eBay right now. And there's no other affordable Epyc CPU mount options on the market as it exists today. For this chassis and both blades, as well as a set of rack rails, it was only $500 for this entire system. Now, the problem is, this is a very proprietary system. I can't exactly swap power supplies or motherboards very easily, as everything is designed to fit exactly in this chassis. But the idea of having 2 CPU compute nodes with a whole bunch of PCI Express connectivity for only $500, that was too enticing to let go. So in theory, with a compatible CPU and memory, we should be able to just plug these in and make them work. At their heart, they are just a PC motherboard. They just happen to have a shared power backplane on the rear end of it. So let's go ahead and try getting that AMD 7601 installed in one of these blades, loaded up with memory, and see if it turns on. So that is the CPU and memory all assembled. Now let's go over the couple of things that I already know are going to be difficulties, starting with the storage on this system. Now I mentioned that this does have 6 NVMe U.2 trays along the back side, and those are populated via these Oculink connectors right here on the motherboard. Now, the difficulty is power to those drives. You see, on top of the motherboard and the 10 gigabit mezzanine card, there's one other PCB inside of here, and that is the power distribution board that connects the power backplane into the server chassis itself. That board also provides power to the 6 drive sleds inside of this server. This server only came with a single U.2 power cable though. And here's where it gets even more challenging. That cable is proprietary coming off of that power distribution board. Not only that, but Quanta, in their infinite wisdom, as soon as a product goes end of life, deletes all references of that product having ever existed off of their website. If you go try to look up this server right now, which was manufactured in 2018, you will find exactly 0 references to it anywhere on the internet. There's no information on drivers, there's no information on CPU support, there's no information on memory support, there's no reference to this system having ever existed. I can't find a manual, I can't find anything that says this server exists except for the eBay listing that I bought it from. So, finding parts for this system is going to prove fairly difficult. Finding any references for any problems that might occur with getting the system to work, that's going to be downright impossible. There is hope though, as what little information I can find on this server, it's all good news as far as compatibility goes. This 10 gigabit network card, for example, this is a Quanta mezzanine card. However, it is just an Intel X710 and should have pretty standard driver support inside of basically any operating system we wanted to load onto this thing. And while these U.2 sleds at the rear might prove to be pretty useless if I can't get power to them, we do still have two X16 PCI Express slots that I could very easily drop in a NVMe expansion card if I wanted to, and get some NVMe RAID rocking and rolling. But I think that's enough hypotheticals out of me for right now. Let's go ahead and go slide this thing into my rack, fire it up, and see what we're actually working with. All right, we are loaded up into the rack, and I already had some cables that I pre-ran to connect the I/O, because the I/O on the server is on the front of the rack. Not exactly an ideal situation, because all of my I/O cables for everything else run out the backside. But yet again, the $500 price tag was right in the situation. Now, one thing I am pretty sure is going to happen is as soon as I plug in this Blade server, it's probably going to fire on and fire up all the blades, because that's a typical behavior of systems like this. So I'm going to walk around the back, I'm going to plug in the power cables, walk around the front, and let's see if we post. And here goes nothing. Okay, fan spun up. Okay, it looks like we are powered up. I've got a blue light there. I only plugged in one of the power supplies, so we are flashing with an amber warning light on both, but this blade is powered on. But hey, I also have lights on the SFP Plus, so we are getting 10 gig networking. In fact, there's my 10 gig network card plugged in right there. Cool. No signal yet. That's not necessarily abnormal for an Epyc CPU, though. These can famously take up to 5 to 10 minutes to post. I think I'm going to give it all the time in the world, and we'll see if it actually does that. All right, it's been about 20 minutes. Are we at the BIOS screen? No. No signal. Okay. Let's see if we can turn this off. There is a little power button on the front here. It doesn't appear to be turning off. All right, let's go for some drastic measures. There we go. Okay. I think step number one, let's go ahead and get into the BMC, the lights out controller, and let's see if we can find out anything. Yeah. All right. I think we found our IPMI. Let's go ahead and accept the risk. Quanta Cloud, username and password. Okay. Please tell me this is not going to be cloud licensed only, because that would suck. Now again, this is where the lack of documentation is going to be kind of a pain in the ass, because there's not exactly a documented way to reset the IPMI password, or what the default password should be, or what the IP address range should be. Now luckily, this did grab an address over DHCP. I did manage to get that figured out. It is an ASPEED AST2500, which is a very common BMC controller. It's actually the same controller I think that's on my ASRock rack board on my other Epyc server down here. Yeah, beyond that, there's not a lot of info here.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
I'll give you 3 guesses how well this is going. Still no signal out of the VGA, or the USB for that matter. Normally on the keyboard I'd at least get numlock or something if this was trying to turn on in post. But the USB seems to have no power. VGA seems to have no signal. I can see that the BMC is turned on and it gets an IP address, but I can't log into it, even after doing a BMC password reset via the motherboard jumpers. All the lights on, but no one's home.
2 hours later.
Okay. I actually have some really exciting news. I hope. I'm going to go ahead and reboot the Blade really quick while I explain this. Number one, on the front of the server, there's a serial port. It's a USB micro port, and it's labeled serial. Okay? So, I went ahead and plugged the USB cable into that, plugged it into my laptop. My laptop sees a serial port host device, which means there's a controller on the server itself. It's not just a COM port like a dummy serial. It's actually a host serial device, which means maybe that connects to the BMC. Okay? Through much trial and error, I got a signal out of the serial port. And running at 38,400 baud, kind of an odd speed to run at these days, I got a signal. So here's what it looks like. Let's go ahead and plug that in, fire it up, and we are booting into some kind of a Linux environment. I'm not sure what Linux environment, but a Linux environment nonetheless. The really exciting thing comes when we get to the login screen. I can actually get to the login screen, and the password has been reset. So the jumper on the board did reset the BMC password. Unfortunately, the web GUI for the BMC appears to be cloud connected directly to Quanta, so you have to have a license and an active subscription with Quanta to access the BMC on your own local hardware. So here we go. By the way, how did I find the default password? I actually dug up an old Serve the Home post about a Quanta board completely unrelated to this one, completely different platform, and it was the same default username and password. So the user is sysadmin, and the password is superuser. Both of those all lowercase, but I get to a root prompt on this, whatever host this is. I think this is the BMC itself. It's very exciting.
Later that same evening.
So I've been going at this for, I think, about 2 hours now. We're in kind of the same situation. We know that I got serial access, but only to the BMC. And I don't seem to be able to modify anything with the internal PC. It's literally just the Linux kernel that's running on the BMC. I found the www root folder, configuration folder, how to get IP, DHCP, but for the BMC, not for the PC side of things. I don't seem to be able to dial past the BMC itself and into the motherboard. And as far as the motherboard, I've made zero progress at all. I've tried flipping pretty much every single dim switch. I've flipped every jumper back and forth. I think what's happening is the VGA has been disabled in the BIOS, and I can see when the BMC is firing up, there is a driver to do video capture off the AST2500, which is kind of standard practice for BMCs. It's how you do remote KVM through an IPMI, is the video's got to be captured some way. I literally just need to change that configuration or that parameter in the BIOS of the PC to enable it to display out the VGA port and not just pass through to the BMC, but I can't dial that far into it. I don't even know if the PC's posting at this point. It makes a lot of noise, I can tell you that much. So, unfortunately, I think this is going to be it for today. I've put in as much effort as I possibly can, at least for one video, to get this thing up and running, but I think we're going to have to crowdsource this one. If any of you have any experience with this particular server or Quanta Blade servers in general, please leave a comment down below or get in touch with me via my business contact email. You can find it on the YouTube About page. One of the things I like to do on this channel, and the reason I like home labbing, is finding equipment like this at pretty reasonable values and literally saving it from e-waste for at least another generation or two. Getting some use out of this hardware that would otherwise be scrap. The hardware inside of the system is pretty good. Again, we've got first or second generation AMD Epyc CPUs. We've got 16 DIMM channels. There's a whole bunch of compute potential inside of that box. If only we could use it. If you're interested in potentially helping me solve this problem, I will leave links down in the video description to where you can download the full serial output of the BMC controller, as well as any other information that I've found on that. I'll also post high-resolution pictures of the motherboard and all the different dip switches and any other information or relevant links that I've found. I'll put it all below because I really want to be able to make these things work. Before I even started this video, I reached out to Quanta directly and asked them if they had a QVL or a qualified vendor list for any supported CPUs in this platform, if they had any links to BIOS or drivers or manuals or anything else that might be relevant for this. They responded, "We don't recommend using CPUs that weren't designed to be used in this platform, and we cannot provide you with any relevant documentation." So thanks, Quanta. But like I said, I think this is where I'm going to leave you in this one. If you like this video, make sure to drop it a like, even though we didn't really accomplish anything today, and make sure you're subscribed to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. And if you like this kind of content and like me taking risks on $500 blade servers like this, that crap's expensive. Maybe kick me over a couple of bucks. Head on over to craftcomputing.store. You can get yourself a pint glass, coffee tumbler, whiskey stones, or any of the other accessories that we sell. Or join me on Patreon. Minimum donation of $1 a month gets you access to the Discord server where you can chat directly with myself or any of the other hosts from Talking Heads. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, everyone.